you're joining us from. We're glad that you're able to join us today for this webinar, the last one for our first series. And today we're just going to get to hear from children themselves what they think child participation really is. We've been talking amongst ourselves as adults, child participation practitioners, civil society actors, government and non-government organizations. We've been gathering and talking about amongst ourselves about child participation, but have we bothered to just pause and talk to children, speak to them directly, and get to hear from them what they think child participation really is? We've been engaging over the last 2 months about child participation, and we had Laura Lundy speak to us about her model, the Lundy model of child participation. We had Dr. Elvis Fokala talk to us about the balance model of child participation. We had other actors, child participation practitioners, speak to us about engaging children from different contexts. And I remember us being reminded by Professor Laura Lundy that children are not homogeneous. Child participation has to be context specific but also age appropriate. And so we've been gathering knowledge and information about child participation generally as we speak amongst ourselves. But today we're going to engage children, a panel of children, and an expert from the UN Committee on the Rights and Welfare of the Child who are going to just speak to us about, the children will tell us about what they think child participation is, if they feel they have been participating meaningfully, and what they think or feel should be done better to make them visible in policy making, in development work, not just in Africa, but across the globe. And so the right of all children to be heard and taken seriously constitutes one of the fundamental values of the Convention on the Rights of the Child. It is a right of all children without exception. The Committee on the Rights of the Child, and I'm so happy one of the committee members is here today, identified the right to be heard, which is under Article 12 of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, as one of the 4 general principles of the Convention. And in order to expand the concept of participation outlined in Article 12, the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child, in its general comment number 12, defined child participation. Under the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child and even the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child, children have been conferred upon the right to be heard. They have a right to be heard. But neither of the two mentions child participation. Child participation is a concept that has been conceptualized by practitioners, child participation practitioners. And so the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child tried to just give a definition. Under article or general comment number 12, it's defined as an ongoing process which includes information sharing and dialogue between children and adults based on mutual respect, and in which children can learn how their views and those of adults are taken into account and shape the outcome of such processes. So it's an ongoing process, a dialogue, information sharing dialogue between adults and children. It's not an event. What we've been doing, especially in Africa, has been what we can call tokenistic participation, where we get children during events. Like now we have the Day of the African Child. We get children to come and participate once in a year. Day of the African Child is an event that happens once in a year. But that's what we've been terming as child participation, even at the AU level. And yet we are reminded, according to the general comment number 12, the definition given is that of an ongoing process which includes information sharing and dialogue between children and adults, where they also get to participate in decision making, in shaping the outcome of processes that that impacts their lives. Children have, of course we know, and if we don't know, then we need to know that children have a unique body of knowledge about their lives. There's this common saying among child participation practitioners that children are experts in their own lives. And so children have a unique body of knowledge about their lives, their needs and concerns, together with ideas and views that derive from their direct experiences. I'm not a child today, I'm a child of yesterday. We always joke in Total News that we are former children. Our experiences as children are not necessarily the same as the experiences the children of today are facing. And so it's necessary, although we always say like adults have experience, have the experience of being children, and so they can speak or even decide for children. It's not true, because our experiences are different from the experiences of the children of today. And so we need to continuously engage them, and this will lead to more effective, relevant, and sustainable decisions affecting their lives, and accordingly enhanced fulfillment of their rights. Participation also strengthens accountability. If children have access to the courts and gain confidence, participation promotes children's capacity for civic engagement, tolerance, and respect for others. Children also have a major contribution to make to the communities they live. Their energies, skills, aspirations, creativity, and passion can be harnessed to strengthen democratic discourse, challenge injustice, build civil society, engage in peace building and non-violent conflict resolution, and explore innovative solutions to intractable challenges. So it's very important that we engage children. Children are naturally very creative, and if we can harness on their creativity, on their skills, we can be able to come up, with innovative solutions to the challenges they are facing today. And so child participation, of course, necessitates a shift in power relation. And this is where now the main problem with child participation, especially in Africa, comes into play. It necessitates a shift in power relation between adults and children. Any shift in power We're back. It's okay now. I can go on. Thank you. Sorry about that. Some of the challenges of technology, but it has been fixed, luckily. And so I was just winding up on my brief introduction that children have a major contribution to make to the communities they live in. Their energies, skills, aspirations, creativity, and passion can be harnessed to strengthen democratic discourse, challenge injustice, and I've seen this happen here in Kenya, where, and of course, even the Day of the African Child comes out of that protest by children in South Africa, the Soweto uprising. So when we engage children, we can empower them to challenge injustice, to build a civil society, engage in peace building and even non-violent conflict resolution, and even explore innovative solutions to intractable challenges. And as I finish, children's participation has been one of the most debated and examined aspects of the Convention on the Rights of the Child since it was adopted by the UN in 1989. Of course, this is that truer words have never been said. Children's participation has been one of the most debated and examined aspects of the UNCRC. And today, child participation is still a new concept, and it's difficult to be understood and all the more to be practiced. We are still grappling with what is child participation, even just understanding the concept of child participation, and then practicing the concept. And so one of the goals of the webinar series has been to just try to unpack the concept of child participation so that we can have a clear understanding of what really child participation means and how can we practice it better so that we can engage children meaningfully and have their voices count. And today, we're going to engage some children to just get their feeling and even their views on what they think child participation is, if they feel they've been meaningfully been participating or being engaged at the family level, at the community level, at the national level, at the continental level, let's say AU level for Africa, but also globally at the UN level. And we have an expert from the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child who will also give us maybe just an overview of what child participation, how child participation is happening at the UN committee level, but also globally. And before we get to Professor Philip from the UN Committee of the Rights, the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child, I have a young person here. And hi, Brian.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm very fine and happy.
Why are you happy?
I am excited that we have a representative from the UN here to hear our voices and here to listen to us.
Okay, and we can see black everywhere. We didn't discuss. It's not our uniform as Mtoto News. The background, our clothing. But Brian, you've been in this space of child participation. You have been engaged by Mtoto News, and even the hood you're putting on is Pan-African Child Organization. And later on, we'll discuss a little bit about child organizations. But before we get there, do you feel, okay, what's your understanding of child participation first?
Basically, my understanding of child participation is the most basic one. It's children being involved in decision making, especially in decisions that are going to affect them, which in any case is mostly all of decisions. So, yeah, being involved in making decisions that are going to affect children.
Do you feel you've been adequately involved in decision making?
Then you can never involve us adequately or enough. We can always be involved more, so I have to say no to that. We are not involved enough, considering our governments do not have children representatives in parliaments. The democratic processes in electing school representatives or prefects is not all that fair. From the regional level, you find that we are not involved in making decisions. Even, let me just go into the UN right now. We have a child representative, right? But you might find that even in the children committee, we don't have children there. So definitely no.
Professor Philip, you've heard Brian say that you don't have a child representative on the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child. Maybe you can take note of that. When we get to you can respond to him. But let's begin at the very basic level, at the family level. How far do you think children should be involved in decision making at the family level? And do you feel yourself?
Yeah, let me speak from our families.
Yes.
Okay, first of all, I have to rectify something. That when we say want to be involved, we do not mean want to be involved in just the small decisions. What are we going to eat tonight? What clothes are we going to buy or such? We want to be involved in the major decisions. You see, like in my family, I don't think I've ever been considered when we were choosing whether to move or not. Like to move from one place to another, when you're considering I'm going to lose friends, I'm going to lose my basic society. This is my everything. This is my home, basically. You see, the first definition of home comes from this place, and I'm not involved in moving, even shifting schools and such. So from my family perspective, I'd love to say no. And that is the most basic aspect of society, you see. If we're not involved in our family, then it means we're not going to be involved in the community level, in the county level, in the national, and even in the regional, because these families are what basically make up a nation and the world in general. So I'd love to say that from the basic unit, that is from my family, as much as I've been speaking to my mom and she has been trying, we can be involved more too. African parents, I think they feel threatened when we say we want to be involved. We do not say we want to compromise your decisions and we don't want to respect your decisions. We simply want to feel involved and to have a say in that, you see. We don't always have to win, that is true. But at least being involved in the decision-making process makes it fair and it makes it even easier for us to accept the final decision in general. So yeah.
Because there has been, I can say, a misunderstanding. Some parents probably think involving children in decision making at the family level is maybe challenging their authority. Do you think it's
no, that not at all. Not at all. We love our parents, and their decisions are always going to be very important. You see, there's this argument that has been going on for some time. Their children, they don't know what they want. They don't know what is good for them. Then it is true. It's okay. We're children. We don't know. Then why don't you teach us by involving us? You see, the best experience is the best teacher. That is a saying that is known by everybody, right? Why don't you give us the experience to be future leaders by involving us in those small decisions, right? You are deciding we want to move because money is not enough. Why don't you call me, tell me, Brian, this is what we want to do. Do you have anything you want to say? This is happening and this is why. You see, and sometimes child participation goes in a way that we don't even have to be there or just physically or have a say in any matter whatsoever. You see, whenever you're involved, whenever you know that mom and dad will ask me what I want, I might not get it, but they will ask me. I will always feel involved in every matter. I will feel secure. I'll be free with them, you see, basically. And it improves family relations. Let's just start at the basic level. From that moment, security and assurance comes from that, because I know that I have a say. I am taught to be responsible with the decisions I make, because from there, when you can tell me my decisions have consequences. If you tell me my decisions have consequences and I have never made a decision to see that consequence, you're not telling me anything. So I would love to tell the African parents that we do not want to go against your wishes. We do not want to demean your power as our parents. We respect you and we love you so much, but still involve us. Just talk to us. We are your children after all. We're not strangers, are we? We should be involved in the family. Family compromises of parents and children, right?
Yes.
Yeah, we are part of that. We should be involved.
Yeah, and even from the definition, from the general comment number 12, it says it's information sharing. It's a process of sharing information. It's a dialogue, basically dialogue between adults and children. And so when parents speak to their children, if you're making a decision to move a child from one school to another, it's important to just sit them down and explain why. Probably it's because resources or income has probably has been affected in one way or the other, and so you are not able to pay for this school, and you just sit down a child and tell them, this is why we are moving you from this school to this is why we are moving houses from this house to another. So it's basically sharing information with children, bringing them on board in decision making, and as Brian has put it, it actually improves family relationships. And now, from the basic structure that's family to community, we all belong to a community, whether it's in school. When you're talking about school, are you involved in decision making at school? At home, at the estate in Kenya, we have what we call nyumba kumi, which brings together several households together. They sit and determine decisions, or maybe even just a way of ensuring security, so that you don't have maybe a stranger coming into your neighborhood and then committing crimes. It's basically a form of community policing. And this is another level of decision making, where decisions in estates are made, where decisions in villages are made. Do you think children are involved? You belong to a household somewhere. Do you participate in nyumba kumi meetings? Maybe have your views ever been sought?
Okay, then I have to say why we don't. You see, when it comes to the traditional African lawmaking process, when you tell a man or a woman nyumba kumi, what comes to them is basically the previous way of governing. That was the clan system and the council of elders. So they tend to think it's just a simple gathering of old men and women sitting there and talking, right? And it happens to be that I've been in one of these meetings, but it was against their will. I hid in a house. It was in a house, so I hid. Mona. But what happens usually is they come, the neighbors, the 10 houses, it's actually 10 plus houses. They come and they meet in one house and they talk about security issues. And the children are chased away, you see. Either told to go and play outside or do something else, just not be in that meeting. And I thought it was so private and something so important was going on. But then when I got there, I actually found out they were just talking stories, normal stories, that we children were actually discussing on our own. Something was stolen yesterday. This vehicle was broken into. You see, and in fact, the children had more information than the adults, because we watched some of these events occur, but because we were not involved, we kept it to ourselves. Now we left the adults to their gossip, because that is gossip done. I mean, imagine a community made up of 100 adults, but 200 children. More than 200 children, because if you're talking 100 adults, you're talking about 300 children, right? Now tell me that society does not in any way consider these 300 children, and these 100 adults are at work, either at home cooking, either washing. Now we are on the ground, but we're not consulted in any way. Our parents have to rely on the gossips that in our own versions of the story, because I mean, if you ask me at home, I'll have my own version. You ask my friend, but the problem is nyumba kumi is very effective. That was in the traditional society. I am a teenager right now. I'm 17 years old, so I'm not the young child I was, but you tend to find out that even me, as old as I am, I'm not even being involved. Let me talk even of my friend who's 20 years. They are not. They want the 50 and 40-year-old people there. And it's so wrong, because you tend to find out that security issues and all matters of the community, basically, we tend to be excluded from on the basis that we are too young to not understand. That's not true. I don't believe when you get... I know you tend to gather more experience and get wiser, but I'm pretty sure I'm not dumb or stupid because I'm young. So no. And then in school, you asked me about school, right? Yes. In school, let me talk about my personal experience in school. In my high school, we have a very democratic way of electing leaders, and it's so perfect on paper. I mean, you look at it and you're just amused and happy and feel like you have power, right? Now let elections come. The teachers will go, they'll prepare the ballots, they'll decide what kind of posts that we are going to elect. Like, I remember the last year that I was in school, that was this year. And we only elected the deputy captains, you see. We did not elect the captains or the chief captain, that was the president, you see. If you take away the basic democracy structure of children, you're literally teaching us that the government can never be fair to us. You're teaching us that we can never have a say, ever. So what are you bringing up? You're bringing up people who are going to be rowdy teenagers, rowdy youth. We're going to be fighting in political rallies, because we were taught unless we fight, unless we become violent, we cannot have our way. Democracy cannot come to be. So Dan, I don't believe in the community level children are engaged either.
Okay. I can also share my experience in school. I think I am a beneficiary of their democratic way of choosing leaders in school. I was somehow the favorite of my class teacher, so she kept nominating me, or rather electing me.
Nominating.
Into the position of class prefect. And so away from the family, from society, from the community and school, at the national level, here in Kenya, do we have any child participation forums that have been created by the government of Kenya to facilitate your participation in decision making at the government level or in government?
I'm sure there are people waiting to just hear me answer this. I am excited to say that in Kenya we have the Kenya Children's Assembly. It is a government, a very stable structure of government that consists of children making decisions. But now let me tell you how it works. Apparently, from what I've seen, okay, let me just speak the truth. The Children's Council, the Children's Assembly of Kenya, basically consists of children. A very stable structure of government. It's so perfect, but now when it comes to the implementing, I'm left to wonder, how effective is it going to be in implementing this? We are in our election period right now, and we are going to be, our National Assembly was just broken down a few days ago. Now I'm left to wonder, are the new leaders actually going to consider these children? I understand that you, Dan, had to fight to get the leaders, the previous ones, to listen to these children at some event in Kilifi, right? Now I'm left to wonder, how about these new ones? They don't know anything about the Kenya Children's Assembly. And as far as I know, it is very important for children to be in school. I understand that, and right? And their meetings tend to be after school, right?
Yes.
But now you give children one meeting and they are there with adults and uniform and structures and processes that work, then I think this is intimidation in a way. I mean, we are used to school where there is a timetable, a routine that we follow basically. It's how we operate, and we've been nurtured in such a manner that this leads to this leads to this, right? So we know that if there is an adult there and there's a structure that we're supposed to follow, we will follow it. I will not raise my hand before I am told to, you see? And I understand that structures are very important. But having a children's assembly that is like parliament might not be the perfect way to give children their own rule.
Okay.
You see, having a council that lets children be children, closing the doors, shuts out their adults, let them be rowdy, let them be children, that you might say is very effective. And even if this one is actually effective and the children are actually able to bring out their say, are the leaders going to listen to it? What is the Kenya Children's Assembly secretariat or the adults doing to make sure that the leaders are actually going to listen to the children?
Wow, that's an interesting perspective. I'm sure we have representatives from the Directorate of Children's Services, where the Kenya Children Assembly is domiciled. You've taken note of that. So we have a structure, and Brian is calling it too formal. It's not child-friendly. It's almost like, of course, the structure was designed by adults without even input. Okay, I'm not sure about that. But according to what Brian says, it's not child-friendly. We need to make it child-friendly. When we are forming a structure for child participation or a forum for child participation, let children be children. The way they will express themselves is different from the way adults will express themselves. And so Brian is just pointing out that, yes, we have a good forum for child participation in Kenya, the Kenya Children Assembly, created by the government of Kenya, funded by the government and partners, but it's not child-friendly. And he's also pointing out a very important concern, that how effective is their participation in decision-making. They meet, yes, they sit probably twice or thrice in a year. They come up with resolutions they share with the Directorate of Children's Services. Are these resolutions implemented? They just met in April. They held elections and met. We have some resolutions that were made by some of the assemblies. How far have they been shared in the government, within the government structures, after it has been passed at the sub-county level? Has it either been brought to the attention of the county Directorate of Children's Services to all the way to the national level, so that their resolutions can be implemented and reflected in decision making and even policy making. And we have another child participant, King Etienne from Burundi. Hi, King.
Hello, Dan.
How are you?
I'm fine. How about you?
I'm good. A quick reaction to what Brian, or okay, let's get to your version first. How is child participation in Burundi? How is your experience? All the way, like Brian has shared, from the family level, if you can just summarize the same way, the same questions. At the family level, are you involved in decision making? At the community level, are there structures for child participation? Are you involved in making decision in your village, in your estate, in your school? At the national level, do you have a structure where you engage with the government, either parliament or any officials in government, so that your views can be heard?
Thanks for giving me a time for explain myself. Firstly, to me, at school, we have a club which is called Haki Ambassadors of Child Rights, and we fighting together for making sure if every children was participated, say or like equal rights and so on. And in my country, to we have a department of children, but it's not active now. In my society or in my community which I live, I I'm still fighting for taking a club of children in my community which will talk together maybe with their problems or but in briefly the child participation is at the low level now. Yeah, but me I'm still fighting with with others ambassadors which are working together for that for fix that.
That's in your school. At least you have a club in school, and that's one forum for child
Yeah.
participation. I'm part of also almost a similar initiative in Kenya. We try to go to schools and establish clubs. We call them in Kenya child rights clubs, or we also call them hockey clubs, or child protection clubs, depending on the location of the school and also the school administration. Some of them prefer calling them child protection clubs, but we also form clubs in schools, and that's one good way of enabling child participation at the school level. And what about at the national level? Does the government of Burundi have a structure for you to maybe engage the government?
Okay, at national level, we don't have, but we have a structure which working to these rights, but it's not. I said it's not active because I got a serious problem of connection.
Even here in Kenya, we've had the Kenya Children Assembly on paper. The policy was passed, I think, in 2008. The first Kenya Children Assembly elections were held in 2011. That's 4 years later. And then it went dormant again until last year, this year in April. So we're trying to revive it again. So there's also that aspect of lack of goodwill from the part of governments in facilitating children to participate, especially when it comes to allocating resources towards structures for child participation. And that's a general feeling that we get when we engage children in Africa. So, Professor Philip, that's a general overview of child participation in Africa. Governments are trying to create or form structures for child participation, but then they don't allocate resources or they don't facilitate these structures to be active and to play the role or the mandate for which they were established. In Kenya, we have the Kenya Children Assembly, a very good structure, but again, resources. The government doesn't allocate enough resources to facilitate the Kenya Children Assembly to be active. They meet once or twice in a year, which is not really good or desirable. But again, that's what is happening on the ground. And I always say it is our responsibility as adults to facilitate children to enjoy their rights, including the right to participate. It is there on paper at the UNCRC, at the in the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child. Countries or governments have domesticated these global and regional treaties. And in Kenya, we have the Children's Act that also gives children the right to participate. But then adults are not playing their role in facilitating children to continuously engage in the government, decision making, even in civil societies. I belong to the civil society, but I'll say we have not been doing so well. And this discussion will help us, seal the loopholes, the gaps in practice, in policy, so that we can facilitate children to engage meaningfully. And right now I want to invite a very special guest in our webinar today, Professor Philip Jaffe. I don't know whether I'm pronouncing it right, the Vice Chair of the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child. We are so privileged to have you today in our webinar today. And so, Professor Philip, as you say hi to the participants in our webinar today, your quick reaction to what you've heard from the two child participants in our webinar today. Welcome, Professor Philip.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, hello everyone, and thank you very much for inviting me and for giving me a small moment to share some views and react to what has been said by the two previous speakers. And well, my first reaction is there's a long way to go before children are fully incorporated into society in a meaningful decision-making role. So we have a long way to go, but then again, we've come a long way. All of you have spoken very eloquently about some of the challenges and some of the theoretical aspects related to participation. So I don't want to, I'll take a little bit of a different approach in my reaction. And I'll start off with the observation that was made very early on. Well, how come there's no child sitting on the Committee on the Rights of the Child? I'm not sure I got the question exactly right, but how come there's no child representation in those structures? That's a very valid point. I mean, if I don't want to scare you, but the average age of the Committee on the Rights of the Child is pretty high. You would even say that it's pretty much senior citizens, and you're looking almost at a senior citizen right now. And here these older men and women from around the world are debating issues concerning children without children sitting at the table with us. And I think that could be a valid point to challenge how this structure works. For example, there's another committee on human rights, CRPD, Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. 17 of its 18 members are persons with disabilities. So in many ways, they speak from a perspective of knowledge and experience in a way that the 18th member cannot, although he has other skills. But it's not the same thing on the Committee on the Rights of the Child. Now, having said that, we're very much aware that we need to push for child participation. And let me just say, in defense of the Committee on the Rights of the Child, we're very, very much in favor of child participation. I mean, this is an issue that we champion at every opportunity we get, and we try very hard to enhance children's visibility in all processes and structures and meetings and interactions. And the key word here is dialogue. We bring them in as much as we can at many, many different levels. And I'm not going to go through all of them, but let me just say two things. First of all, whenever a state party, a country comes before the committee, we try very hard to meet with a delegation of children. Is it enough to spend a couple of hours with them? Of course not. But it is substantial when you compare that time to the time we spend with official delegations. We also very much are pushing for every country that prepares its periodic report on the state of children's rights in that country to have a participatory process in which children take part. And we're working very closely with Unicef in trying to engage civil society in every country during the reporting process to incorporate meaningful children's views and even to have children's reports flow towards the committee alongside the official reports. And sometimes many of these reports are really excellent and very challenging in terms of how they address issues that the committee has to take decisions on. And finally, I'm going to close the chapter on the UN for a second. In a second, you have to realize that I think most thoughtful adults know that the future, our human future, rests with children having a greater role. And I can even prove that to you. The proof of the fact that we need children to participate more is that today's adults and the generations before have done a pretty poor job at managing this planet, most countries, and we're in real trouble as we speak in terms of crises that are global crises and crises that will endanger the very existence of humanity. So you could say that adults have failed quite abysmally in the role of stewardship of the common good of people on Earth. So very much so, we have to look to the future and the children of today and the children of the future to correct these failed policies and processes that adults have put into place. And I said most thoughtful adults, all the way up to the Secretary General of the UN, there has been a clear understanding that there has to be given more space, and let me add, more power, decision-making power to young people and children. And there's a process flowing through the UN right now to incorporate children's views and young people's views in a more meaningful and authentic manner. Let me also react on a different level. What happens if we don't realize that children have a right to participate, should participate, and we don't take the actions necessary for them to participate? Well, I think that if we don't take the necessary steps, we have a revolution coming. We have a positive revolution coming. And as you may know, Article 12 that you cited, Daniel, was when it was proposed and incorporated into the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, was called the revolutionary article. The right of a child to express his or her opinion and to have that opinion taken into account in a meaningful way was and is revolutionary, and it opened the door to a real revolution that is playing out. And young people and children have risen with very strong voices around the world, and I'm talking about pre-pandemic times, so up to 2019. Think of all the climate strikes and protests that took place around the world. Think of the Arab Spring when whole regimes were toppled by children and young people. And I could go on and think of the protests, and unfortunately not very effective in the long run, in Hong Kong, in Chile, and other countries that involve children and young people. If we don't give more space, more voice, more opinion to children being able to express themselves, the society as a whole is just going to create more hardened positions on the part of children. So it's also a question of common sense for adults to be more open to children's participation. Let me quickly react to one more point, then I'll come back to you and you can redirect me because I have plenty of things to say. Unfortunately, even among thoughtful adults, our idea, and I'm not speaking about myself, but as an adult in general, adults' perspective on child participation is quite paternalistic. And we would be really happy to have children participate in national assemblies, in school councils, and advisory boards, and so on and so forth, as long as they don't make too much noise and they don't have too much decision-making power. This is the view of children as tokenistic. Participation is, sort of a fig leaf, and they can speak, but we don't really have to. It can go in one ear and come out the other. But they've spoken, they've given their opinion. And this, I think, a lot of people, including children and young people, have to be very wary of, and not fall into the trap of how adults set them up to give them an impression that they're participating. Children and young people need to have their eyes wide open and demand to have meaningful participation. And this takes, and this is my final point, this takes a lot of training for children to be able to fulfill this very more hardened position. It takes training for the children themselves, and it takes training for, let's say, the benevolent adults that are trying to help children to have a greater role in society. So, it's a work in progress. As you mentioned, it's an ongoing process, it's a dialogue, but as time goes by, as years go by, we're walking into something that I have called recently, a year ago, in a paper I wrote. We're marching towards what we call total participation. That is, children who get angrier and more upset and more demanding because they can witness and understand that we're heading for a brick wall in terms of the survival of this planet, for example, with the climate crisis. And I think we just need to pay a lot of attention to where we're heading. So back to you, Daniel, for now.
Those insights of what you're doing as a committee to ensure children views or children participate at the committee or in the work of the committee. I'm particularly happy that when you do state visits, you do engage children. And so I'm looking forward to when you'll be visiting Kenya so that we can bring some children to come and engage with you, and we'll be happy to do that. We as a civil society, we also support children, and we are trying to do that in Kenya currently, to support children to do even a complimentary report to the committee. And I'm happy with I had never heard of that clause. Actually, Article 12 is a revolutionary, or it's termed as a revolutionary clause or article of the UNCRC committee. But as you have pointed out again towards the end of your submissions, that it takes training, building the capacity of children to be able to engage meaningfully. Because when we engage children with when they are not informed, then it doesn't really amount to meaningful participation, because they'll be engaging from a point of I don't want to call it ignorance, but not being informed enough. When you take our children into a room where conversation is happening, probably around, say, budgeting, and you have not empowered them, you've not built their capacity or shared adequate information even on the topic, then they won't be able to engage meaningfully. And I want the two child panelists to react to your presentation before you can proceed on. So Brian said, I think he has a burning issue or a reaction to your views and presentation. That's Brian King here in Kenya. And then the online participants, if you have anything maybe to ask, or maybe a point of clarification from Professor Philip, you can just post in the chat box, and then we'll be able to share your views. Brian.
Thank you so much, Dan. First of all, I have to point out how excited I am that Professor Jaffe here decided to join us today. And I'm very glad that you agreed with me that it is important for children to be part of the Committee on the Rights of the Child. But I would also love to know, okay, now what are we going to do about it? You yourself say that sometimes adults tend to let us talk, but they also let it go. So I'd also love to know, now that you have agreed with me, what are you going to do about it? I would love to know that. And then my burning issue was simple. I consider the child participation to be a very key right of the child. And I think, as you said, we are moving towards a revolution. The future is going to be different from what the past has been. And I think the future of child participation is child-led organization. I understand that we have a lot of child-led organization. And me, myself, I'm part of the PACLO, the Pan-African Child-Led Organization. What makes it different is that it's the only child-led organization that cuts across Africa. We have children from Kenya, Zimbabwe, Burundi, South Africa, Togo, and a lot of other African countries as well. What makes us different is that we are taking child participation to the next step. Letting us now make the decisions for ourselves. How to run an organization, how to make the decisions that are going to affect us, how to identify issues that actually are affecting us currently, and how to come up with solutions that are children-based. And I was in a previous webinar and I learned that there is actually a possibility of child-led research. I think this is the kind of work that PACLO will be doing, because we as children will be making all the decisions, will be coming and deciding what is it that is affecting us as children. And now I'm just wondering, I will take you as the UN representative for this meeting, and so I will ask you, what is the UN doing to support child-led organizations? Because I'm pretty sure by now you have understood and realized that child-led organizations are actually the future of child participation as a right. Child-led organizations are actually the future of educating African children on their rights, actually helping them embrace our rights. Let me speak in first person. Child-led organizations are actually our future and my future as a child. I need to know how to be secure, and I think me as a child, I'll be more secure knowing that there's a child somewhere, they are representing me as a child, and even maybe it's me. Yeah? I'm here and I'm able to talk about my national level. I'm able to talk about my problems in the national level, in the community level, and even in the regional level. So I'm wondering, because I think at this moment, the main hindrance to PACLO becoming a great organization is resources and basically the power to go out there, to be identified by major organizations like the UN, the AU, and such organizations. So I'm wondering exactly, Professor Jaffe, what is the UN doing to support child-led organizations? Yes, and exactly, when I'm asking what are you doing, I also want to know, if you're not doing anything, are you planning on starting anytime soon? And if yes, how exactly are you planning to support child-led organizations like PACLO, which I'm part of? And I'm pretty sure there are many organizations, not just in Africa. We have many organizations as well internationally. I am aware of that. Uh-huh. Yes, and I think that is all for me. I am very glad, but I think I'd first of all like for you to respond to my previous question. What are we going to do about the issue of children not being involved in the UN Committee for the on the Rights of the Child? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Brian. Yes, Prof. Go ahead, Prof.
Question, and I hope you won't feel too disappointed by the answer. Even if we were 18 members of the Committee on the Rights of the Child who said, well, starting tomorrow, we would like to have half of the committee or 90% of the committee or 10% of the committee members to be persons under 18 years old, we wouldn't be able to do it. The only way the structures of the UN change is if there are member states who make and take decisions on how these structures, and I'm not speaking only about the UN committee, on every structure of the UN. The UN is a collection of states that makes their own rules. So if we want to change a comma in the Convention on the Rights of the Child, we need to have 196 states that agree to make that change. Or we lose some of this, or we can have 50 states that change a comma in the Convention on the Rights of the Child. But that means that 143 other states would, 47 states would not follow the Convention on the Rights of the Child because they would no longer be ratifying it. My only point is to say that it doesn't take being convinced to be able to make a change. Now, on the other hand, what I think is useful is to play up what you actually shared afterwards, which is that there are more and more child-led organizations. And in fact, in my own country, one of our most proactive child rights, child turning adult very soon or just recently, has set up a NGO that provides all the know-how and backing and training for these child rights led organizations to be set up and to become important players. So it's a matter of time and a process by which we bring these child-led organizations to the fore. Not that you're not doing invaluable work already, but to make your work, how should I say it, even more impactful. And the last point I want to make is, forget about the Committee on the Rights of the Child for a second. We're just a group of specialists on children's rights, but there's a whole structure around us. There's UNICEF. UNICEF is a huge organization that takes care of children in many different ways and that promotes children's rights also. They should also be reformed. And all the structures that exist within the UN at this point are starting to have what are called children's advisory teams. And this is an important, a significant step, one of the steps that needs to be taken. And I don't know if you know about an NGO called Child Rights Connect, which is an organization in which many other NGOs are members of. And I think that you should go back to your organization, child-led organization, and to your sister and brother child-led organizations, and encourage them to become part of this conglomerate, this group of NGOs that promotes and defends children's rights, because that's also where a lot of power lies. and not only leave it to a consultation advisory team, which is very useful, by the way, but I think it's only a first step towards real child participation. So I don't know if I really answered your question, but I do think that it's a matter of being able to persuade a significant number of countries to reform the structures of the UN and to promote membership of children. And for that, you have to look also at what happened in terms of the representation of women, for example. For many decades and centuries, women were not represented in any power decision-making structure. And slowly but surely, they have been occupying more and more positions of power. In the Committee on the Rights of the Child, until the last election, we were 9 men and 9 women, which is great for parity, and I think that's an important step. But yeah, we should incorporate children as well, and that will come over time. And I think that's part of your cause. And you have sympathetic members of the committee. And by the way, not all members of the committee are in favor of children being members of the committee. Well, I can't answer that question specifically, but my guess is that not all members of the committee would see this as a positive step. So there's a lot of convincing to do among the adult population and the member states. Remember, member states, countries are the ones that have the power at the UN, not an individual member of the committee like myself. Back to you.
Thank you, Prof. Now that you're speaking about child-led organizations, in your general comment number 12 of 209, the committee explicitly recognized the role that child-led organizations and children's representatives play in the reporting process. I'm speaking on the reporting process and cycles. In particular, paragraph 131 of the general comment number 12, the committee wrote that they welcome written reports and additional oral information submitted by child organizations and children's representatives in the monitoring process of child rights implementation by state parties, and encourages states, parties, and non-governmental organizations to support children to present their views to the committee. And my question is, have you received any reports, maybe from a child-led organization? Specifically, I'll speak for my continent, Africa. Have you ever received reports either from child-led organizations or NGO or children supported by organizations or states?
Actually, Daniel, I'm a little bit at a loss to answer you. I don't recall a specific report submitted by children or a child-led organization, but that is not to say that there hasn't been one from an African country. I just don't have that in mind. And actually, let me throw that question back to you. Do you know of any children's report generated by a child-led organization that was submitted alongside a state party report?
My answer is no. I don't know of any, but we are in the process right now as Mtoto News. We are supporting our children to present a report, and we also support.
Daniel, can I come back and just follow up on and I'm
okay.
I'm glad I was not caught in saying something that was not true, because I can't recall a single report from the African continent. But in all fairness, there have been very few really child-generated reports that have been submitted to the committee. I don't want to name the countries, because that's a little bit unfair, even if they're positive examples. There are a couple in Asia, a few in Europe, Eastern Europe as well. So it would be very welcome that African countries do that job as well. Whoa, something bad happened there. But let me make one other point. When you read the general comment, listen to the language that it uses. The committee would welcome, the committee encourages that children submit reports and so on and so forth. That's not how it should be. It should be, of course, not an obligation, but it should be the standard that child-led organizations receive the necessary support and resources to canvass the views of children from their own perspective and submit their views to the committee in a report. And that should be standard operating procedure for all state parties. So yeah, I think that the language reveals how much work we still need to do. And as I said before, we're working very closely with Unicef to make sure that there are more participatory processes available to children in getting their views into the state party reports, but also generating their own reports. But there's a long way to go. Now, let me also say one more thing. Anyone that's listening, if there's a child or a group of children or an NGO of children that wants to get their views to the committee during a reporting a cycle of a state party, you can submit it. Nothing holds you back. And not only can you submit it, if you have an important issue to flag, it doesn't have to be a comprehensive report on everything pertaining to children's rights in a given country. You can bring up a specific issue and flag that for the committee, and we'll be very happy to take it up. And I can even tell you that if you submit a report and it reaches our desk alongside all the other reports we receive, your child-led organization's report will receive a lot more attention than many, many reports that we receive. So by all means, don't hold back. Back to you.
Thank you. I don't know if we have any reaction in the chat box. John? Or King Etienne from Burundi. Do you have any reaction to Professor Phillips' remarks?
Yes, I have.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so I'd like to ask Mr. Phillips if he can give us a knowledge, like information, which will give us knowledge about leading child rights organization. It will be better if we as children have this knowledge for become the good leaders on child rights for the future. Is it possible, Mr. Phillips?
I'm really sorry, I missed half of the sound. So Daniel, could you repeat the question, please?
Yes, I can.
Yeah.
So I say that is it possible for giving us information which you will get knowledge about leading child-led organization, because we as children we want to be a great leaders or deciders on the future about in organization of children. It is possible for giving us those knowledges.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Well, yes, of course. What I can do is, what I can do is put you in contact with an organization that can provide you with this information and give you some of the steps and processes that would be helpful to move forward in terms of setting up and making your future more impactful. So yes, I can provide you with that. But a good place to look is on the web page of the organization I already told you about, Child Rights Connect. They have some toolkits, and you can also look at, if I'm not mistaken, Save the Children also has some really good papers and toolkits explaining how to make participation meaningful, inclusive, and sustainable. So that would be two places I'd look.
Yes, Kenyan, you can check out the resources that Professor has pointed out to you. Save the Children has a resources website. You can check them out. Child Rights Connect, you can check them out. And there are many other resources online if you're able to engage.
Let me ask a question to you for a second, because we have two very articulate young people here.
Yes.
If I may, to you, is it Brian? Is that right? Yeah, you said you were 17 years old, and so this is a very, you still have just a little bit of time before you lose your status as a child, and I'm sure you're going to pack a lot of good work into the final months and year of your childhood, which I think that would be to the benefit of everyone. But what I'd like to challenge you both about is, what do we do with young children? How do we get, children is from 0 to 18. How do we get 10-year-olds involved? How do we get 6-year-olds involved? How do we get 4 years old involved? And how does child participation, in your view, play out at those ages? And do you have any ideas that I can take on board so that all children are represented and not only teenagers and young adolescents?
Yes, okay. Thank you, Professor Jaffe. Yes, I will be crossing over to the other side very soon, and I am excited as well as disappointed that I could not do that much. But then again, you asked me a question: how do we represent the young children? I come back to what I'd previously told you. The child-led organizations, I'm telling you, these are key. You know why? Because these are grassroots organizations. Like in my organization, I know that I'm able to get access to these young children, Professor, because I am a child and I am able to get into contact with them. They are my younger brothers, my sisters. I meet them on the streets when they're playing. In my schools, I'm able to get into contact with these schools as an alumni of the schools. When we're talking about child participation, you're very correct to say that most of all, we tend to represent only the teenagers who are actually able to speak out. But an organization like Mtoto News here, we get trainings. I am a trained journalist here and a trained child advocate as well. And I do understand that in my training, we did not only have teenagers. I understand we had a 9 and a 10-year-old here. And I'm sure we can even go younger as long as we get the resources and the engagement we need. If you consult child-led organizations, you're able to find not only teenagers, because after all, we are not looking at adults here, we're looking at children, and children go from 18 to below, not 18 to above, you see. When you're looking at an average organization, you're going to find adults and old people, sorry to say. But when you're looking at a child-led organization, you only go lower, you do not go above. You tend to go from 18 to down. So again, for me, I believe the solution is so simple. Engage child-led organizations. And again, to throw a question to you, you say that we need to convince nations in order for us to actually make a change to the Committee on the Rights of the Child. And it is very true. I actually understood this before. But now I guess my question was, what can we do right now? I believe in small changes that make a difference, right? So you as the Vice Chancellor, the Vice Chairman, what can you do to actually help us out as children? Because we are reaching out to you. We are reaching out after talking and after yapping, as others might call it, after shouting and all that. And so what can we do right now? What can you do right now? The small changes. We as children just love these small changes because they tend to have a butterfly effect. You do this, it leads to this, it leads to this. Like me here, I actually started this just a bit of time before, and I believe I've been able to convince even younger children than me to actually join in the fight for their rights. Surprisingly, actually not surprisingly, more than 90% of the children I've talked to did not know about the Day of the African Child, and this is one of the most important days of the child, basically. So it's all about consulting these children organizations, child-led organizations, and giving them the ability, the power, the resources they need to actually do what they do, which is talk to children, engage children. It is the simplest solution I can give to you, Professor Jaffe. Engaging children at the most basic level, which is child-led organizations. Another method is by simply reaching out to the grassroots agents. By this, I do not mean the organizations, I mean the schools. Over 70% of the time spent by children is spent in schools. If you reach out to kindergartens, and you know, we have a tendency of going to schools and asking them to perform plays and dramas and dance and sing without actually getting to have anything meaningful with them. Why not go into a school and say, no, I want a conference with children and I want them to tell me what they want? And of course, you'll have some requests for biscuits and all, but you will also get a request from a child who actually knows that I have this right that is violated by a lot of people, and we tend to cross over it. So instead of actually going to schools and asking children to perform, why don't we go to schools and actually engage the children? An engagement is not you talking, me listening. An engagement is you talk, I listen, I talk, you listen. Yes, thank you so much, Professor.
I fully agree. And, you know, the most basic human right was not in the Convention on the Rights of the Child. It's turn taking. It's engaging one and the other, listening and reacting. And it's the dialogue that was mentioned before. I would like to, I do want to answer you directly. What are the small steps that you can take? So I can give you a couple of examples which I think would be meaningful in the current system from my perspective as someone who's knowledgeable about the UN system and where I would make suggestions. My biggest encouragement to you and to child-led organizations is to get information to us. Get us the information. Tell us what is happening on the ground. Tell us what you observe and what your fellow children of all ages are experiencing, subjected to, that we are not necessarily learning from state entities and governments and specialized agencies. Let me give you a very, very concrete response that comes out of a country from Africa, and I will not name the country. When we received this country for our dialogue, when we call it a constructive dialogue, the state party was very, how should we say it, kept patting itself on the back, explaining how much it had invested in schools, new schools, schools in remote areas of the country, hiring more teachers, training teachers, and equipping all schools with computers. And I can't go through the whole list of everything that they reported having carried out, but it was very impressive. Unfortunately for them, just a few weeks before, we had met with a delegation of children from that country. And a really amazing group of young activists, ranging from 10 to 15 years old in my memory. And I remember distinctly one of the young girls telling us, you know, all this talk in the report about how schools have been improved and so on, that's a lot of BS, excuse my language. In the school I go to, all the computers that were, the few computers that were allocated have been stolen by the teachers and the headmaster. So we don't have any access to computers. The structures that they built, that's all fine, but we don't have, as a young girl, we don't have lavatories and toilets for girls. And that's a real problem because we're at risk for gender-based and sexual violence on the part of not only older students, but also the teachers. In fact, she shared with us, just getting to school is quite a challenge because on the way from home to school, it's a fairly dangerous journey. So my point is that information was extremely crucial to challenge the government and put it black on white in our concluding observations that there had to be a lot more thought put into how schools are operated and providing protection for children in a place, as you pointed out, where children are captive most of their waking hours. I mean, most children, it's their job to go to school from dawn to dusk, and that's where you find them, but they have to be safe in schools. And I also agree with you that we should use schools to the extent possible to meet with children and have meaningful dialogues with them, whether it's adults going into schools and having these dialogues or child-led organizations going into schools and having dialogues with children. And that runs against something that you may already know, but I'll speak mostly from the perspective of my own country, which is Switzerland. Schools are still very reticent to promote children's rights. They keep saying, we care about children. Children are our daily preoccupation, and they have a right to education, and we have children's councils. But when push comes to shove, schools are still run pretty much like they were a century or two ago, a bit like army barracks, where you have a hierarchy and teachers have all the power and so on. So I think, schools, it's double-edged. Schools need to change, but it's also where a lot of children are and where you can talk to them. And one more point that I wanted to react to, it's really briefly. I'm also very concerned that most children do not know about the Day of the African Child or the International Day of the Child on November 20th. But let me challenge it back to you. What was the topic of this year's Day of the African Child? Can you point it out to me? I'm sorry, I'm not quizzing you, but beyond knowing the date, do you know what the issue that was highlighted is this year in Africa?
Yes, of course. I consider this day our Christmas, so I had to know. It was eliminating harmful practices for the betterment of the child, basically. And yes, we did discuss some issues, but it was also unfortunate to know that most children only know of the crimes of harmful practices. We're talking FGM, child marriage, and child labor. They basically did not have the chance to delve deeply into the harmful practices that actually affect African children. So yeah, and yeah.
Sorry, yeah, I wasn't to put you on the spot, but and I had a pretty good idea that you knew really what the issue was. But let me come back to that for a second. I actually spoke to a couple of members of the African Committee on making some sort of a joint tweet or communication on the occasion of the Day of the African Child. And let me just show you how appalling it is sometimes. One of these members actually told me, I don't know really what to say. It's as if we haven't moved forward in terms of harmful practices. I don't really know what to communicate because and in fact, I couldn't quite tell if she was a bit ashamed that many countries had not moved forward, or if she was putting her head in the sand in terms of trying to use this day as an occasion to have meaningful advocacy. And I share this as a bit of a admission. I think that it's a good example of how adults do not represent the views of children if they're going to miss out on an occasion to communicate about things that happen, on things on a day that counts more than any other for children and actually is your Christmas. So yeah, again, we have a long way to go. Back to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Jaffe. I personally enjoy your company and I do look forward to meeting you again. I hope in your concluding remarks you'll be telling us you'll be meeting us once again. But I will love to give it to you and ask you to kindly give us your concluding remarks.
Oh, sure. Well, they'll be very brief. First of all, again, I think I want to thank you for setting up this possibility to have an exchange with the two of you out in Burundi and in Kenya. And I think we should have more meetings of this type. And I feel a little bit sad that we don't have the French-speaking Africa to also engage with in this discussion, but maybe it's a matter of setting up something separate. I'm also very honored that you accept to speak and exchange with an older guy like myself. And I have no excuses here. I understand children's rights from the perspective of an older person, although I have to tell you, and I would like to share with you that the reason why I got into the field of human rights and children's rights is because I was a rebel as a child and as an adolescent, and I never really understood how it was that children didn't have a more significant say in their lives, and why adults always told children, stay quiet, don't speak up, adults are speaking, you have to respect them, etc., etc. So a lot of what the passion is that animates me has to do with my own childhood and adolescence, and also wishing to leave something a bit better and talking about intergenerational equity in a global sense, not only in terms of the environment and climate change, but it's also my responsibility to make sure that my young children, and they're 10 and 13, they have more rights than I had when I was growing up. So I feel very engaged, but I welcome these dialogues, and I think if you can keep in mind that it's difficult to change systems, but that you have very good tools at your disposal. You have a lot more knowledge than I had when I was an adolescent or a child. You know a lot more about the international mechanisms, and we didn't even speak about filing complaints with the Committee on the Rights of the Child and getting your countries to ratify OPIC, the optional protocol on individual communications. But your knowledge is your best weapon, and your knowledge and engagement and the capacity to get information to flow. I think if you master the tools around those three concepts, you have a very good chance at making sure that the world will change. And Brian, and is it Etienne out in Burundi? I just hope that when you become adults in a few months or years, you don't become as dumb as we are, that you stay as smart and articulate as you are now. So back to you.
Thank you so much, Professor Jaffe. We will promise not to be like you guys. And yes, I do really look forward to meeting you again, and maybe even the whole committee, because I noticed that you kept saying that convincing people is difficult, but I guess we as children have a gift and we are willing to try. I guess that's the best part. King Etienne is from a francophone country, and so he might not be the best person in English, but I do understand that he is here and he's excited to give his remarks. King Etienne, why don't you have a word?
En français.
Remarks about
Just
okay, my remarks is only thankful to Mr. Phillips for his for giving us let me say the best thing with us, and I promise me as Brian King, and also I'm a member of FACLO, Pan African Child-led Organization. I represented the Central Africa. I forgot to say that. I will promise me and Brian King for doing our best for pushing, like fair, or the church-led organization. That's all. Thank you.
final remark has been my remark. I've been going on and on about this. Would love to meet you again and talk about more important things. We want to learn how to file complaints against, child rights violations, and we would love to know how to get into contact with you guys. So yes, I guess that is my final remark. And as you've noticed, you people, I have a new guest, Danas. So yes, I will let her have a word as before we give to you, Professor Jaffe, so that you can tell us. Tell me specifically. I'll get in contact with you. Tell us how to actually get in contact with you, Liz.
Thank you so much, Brian. To the participants, King Etienne, Professor Jaffe. My name is Liz Amandla Busisa. I am dance colleague here at Mtoto News, and it is an honor just to be a part of this webinar series. I have personally learned a lot on child participation. It's very insightful to hear the perspectives of children and how they want to be engaged more in society. And it's important what you've said, Professor Jaffe, that we hope they do not grow up to be like us. We don't want them to be like us. We want them to grow up very knowledgeable, very confident in expressing themselves, and even influence the younger generation who are coming after them, just to be involved more on issues that affect them as children. Before we conclude, I'd just like to give a vote of thanks. Thank you for joining and accepting our invitation to this webinar series. We are really grateful for taking your time to join us and to give the insights and just the knowledge that you've shared on what the UN committee is doing to champion child participation, not just at the international level, but even in Africa. We are really grateful for the insights you've shared. And I'd just like to also say that Jennifer would have been excited to be a part of this webinar series. She is our CEO, but she was unable to join us because she is out of the country on official duties. But we'll pass your greetings to her. We'll also convey that this webinar series has been a success, and she will be watching it once it is aired on our social media platform. So thank you so much for your time. And yeah, we hope to engage with you more even when you come to Kenya. We will invite you to our offices for you to come and interact with children on a one-on-one basis. If you accept our invitation, you are so much welcome. So we look forward to interacting with you again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Liz. She's our handler here, and we love her so much. We have many people here, as we told you. We have an audience here. We have a lot of people, and I'm sure they are all saying hi. But yes, Professor Jaffe, we hand it over back to you to just close the very successful child participation webinar series for us.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, all of you, and congratulations for all the energy and logistics and hard work you put into organizing this series. I think it's a very clear example of a best practice that you've set up. I thought that the way you conducted the exchange today was outstanding, and I don't mean this in a condescending way, in a very respectful way. I think it was very pleasant to be able to have this dialogue and to feel free also at my end to be able to share what I think and to hear from you also some of the direct issues that you care about, and even some veiled criticism, which is absolutely fine and helpful. I hope that, as I shared at the beginning, before I think we were engaged in our discussion, Africa is a very special place for me. My sister was born in Nairobi. I grew up in East Africa, and I'm married to an African woman. So in many ways, the issues of African children resonate, even though I'm as white as can be, and resonate in a meaningful way with me, based on my history, but also for the fact that my children are partly African as well. And so I do hope that we have other occasions to exchange. I'd be very happy to come to Nairobi. Actually, it doesn't take a lot of convincing. And if you want to envision this, I suggest we have a discussion at some other point. And lastly, I really do believe, and I want to repeat this one last time, I do think that the creativity, energy, knowledge, and passion stands with children, and that if we have a better world ahead of us, it's only because you're going to make that difference. And so I count on you. And I hope that you will shove the older generations aside as soon as possible. So thank you very much. Back to you.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Thank you, Professor Jaffe, and thank you to all the panelists who came before in the webinar series. If you didn't get a chance to be part of it, kindly just check it out in our YouTube platform at Mtoto News. You'll find the live thing there. You'll find meaningful discussions with children from different countries all over Africa. We're very glad to have you, Professor Jaffe. We look forward to having you again. And the insights were amazing. The panel discussion was amazing. All of you guys are amazing, and I look forward to seeing all of you in the next webinar series. Bye-bye, everyone, from here in Nairobi.
Bye, guys.